Welcome to your Innovation Coffee Break. I'm Vijay Rajendran, Director of Innovation and Partnerships at 500 Startups Ecosystems Group. Every week, I'll be joined by startup founders, investors, and corporate innovators to share diverse experiences and views. So pour that cup of coffee, make yourself comfortable. Wait, it's COVID-19, you're already comfortable. And here we go. I'm excited today to be joined by Chris Cowart. Chris has the resume of like 6 people, so I will try to do it justice. Chris is a user experience design and product executive. He's worked across brands, innovation consulting, and venture communities over the past 25 years. Most recently, he was an entrepreneur and resident at X, the moonshot factory over at Alphabet, that many folks who follow the world of innovation and tech know well. That was a place where he was leveraging AI and ML to accelerate the circular economy around food waste, which is a great topic given, of course, everything that's happening in the world today. Over a 14-year career at IDEO, he pioneered the human factors and user research disciplines in the design industry and launched many first of their categories products. He has a new venture and investment focus on disrupting retail, health and wellness, and consumer financial services. We'll talk about some of that today. Chris is a thought leader on the future of sports and the future of medicine. Chris, welcome to Innovation Coffee Break.
Thank you. That's a mouthful. When you said short bio, I should have made it shorter, given you were going to be reading that out all in one thread. So, but I appreciate it. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you too. Chris, so much is happening today. As we said, we're in the throes of the COVID-19 pandemic, and it's already having a huge impact on our world today. As a designer, how do you think about enormous, problems of this kind?
Yeah, this has been fascinating. Both, I've been thinking about today around the design perspective as well as kind of the futurist perspective, and what that means for us as in the corporate innovation context, as well as entrepreneurs and investors. And today is a funny confluence of spending time with you. And this morning I started my day with a Sutter Health board meeting, and I run one of the committees that helps share what Sutter is doing and get feedback on what's happening. And I looked back in our records, because I have to do that as a committee member. You're like, what did we do in January? And in fact, we were reviewing the innovation portfolio of the head of patient experience, including telemedicine. And he was sharing all of this interesting stuff. And I'll wrap back around to this, but I think right now it's becoming, from a designer's perspective, I see this as kind of like, this is an extreme user case, right? If we think about that and kind of onboard the idea of design, of ethnography and design thinking, we are inspired by this like 5th and 95th percentile. I'm doing my bell curve in the middle here. So we're interested in these 5th and 95th percentile and see if they're actually representative of a market. And I think this is an amazing, fortunate and unfortunate experience of trying to figure of an extreme use case. And I think we will find this, there will be some really interesting innovations that will either be culled by this as a filtering and a forcing function, or I'm very hopeful for new versions of innovation and maybe just slight variations on a theme of services that we're already interacting with, that just kind of get distilled or crystallized or condensed in a meaningful way. One that somebody shared with me in the retail space was thinking about Best Buy. So they're trying to outfit their kids' room or den as now a schoolhouse, kind of like we were doing a couple of weeks ago, and ordering all sorts of things that would help kind of accentuate the kids' learning environment. And so they ordered something on Best Buy and just drove over and paid for it, remotely. Somebody opened their trunk and put whatever electronics they bought inside. They said thank you and drove away. And it's like, is that a special use case, or will we never step into that, the already eroding brick and mortar again, or will we do it only in certain ways? So I think there's we're going to see a ton of kind of crystallization. So I'm excited about that from a process perspective, and that we use this opportunity to create some amazing stuff. From the futurist perspective, unfortunately, I had this opportunity in 2017 to write a report on future of medicine with a family foundation out of Buffalo, New York. And we actually predicted something like this, like many people, but we actually predicted it by 2024. It's one of those that you hate reading those things. You like being a solid data-driven futurist, and then you look at these kind of things and you realize I really don't want to send that email, LinkedIn post that I told you so kind of thing. And I think it's really and I was talking with a doctor friend of mine over at Stanford and the biodesign program. And his project he worked for a VC firm in 2006 during a sabbatical during part of his residency. And in 2006, his project, mine was stem cell for that same VC firm, and his was pandemic preparation. And one thing that they already identified was the short supply of ventilators. So they actually tried to innovate and create new low-cost ventilators even in 2006 and 2007. So I think that this shouldn't have come by surprise in as much as it is.
Yeah, I think that's certainly something that experts, who have thought about this are saying, like, yeah, we knew that there would be another once in a century kind of event like this. I'm curious if you think back to like SARS or H1N1, there were some lessons learned. Do you think there are going to be some particularly new important lessons learned from this? And ventilators is like one important one that you just mentioned. Other things you think we'll take away?
Yeah, absolutely. I was doing some reading on this in the last day, and certainly having kind of dug into some of the origin stories of this virus and trying to really understand, was it let out of a bio lab on purpose? Is it really the terrible wet market and the ethics around that, and moving from species to humans, that kind of thing? I was reading something that stuck with me around just the notion of tracking, and that I think will be highly debated across labs and countries and us as individual citizens. But in this particular case, I think the lesson will be, they actually had inspectors in a biology lab, in a virus lab in Wuhan, and really kind of predicted that their security measures were not up to snuff and this could easily sneak out. Now that neatly fits into a bunch of conspiracy theories and origin stories, but I do think that kind of tracking of viruses and toxins and even some synthetic biology labs, right? Like some of the things that we used to talk about so vigorously at Singularity University around synthetic biology and biohacking. These are some of the reasons that you would get some very funny looks from the audience, like, wait, now what? You're doing what exactly in a biohacker space? And these are the kind of things that I think those are going to be some very strong lessons that we'll have to figure out how to navigate.
For folks that may be just catching up, when you use the terms synthetic genomics and biohacking, what do you mean?
So I think in this large meme of things that go from analog to digital, and then if anything that goes from analog to digital, it then jumps on some sort of exponential or Moore's law type of curve, which means it grows quickly. So if you take something like biology, which we learned in school was like pipettes and test tube, it was very visceral, and even sometimes just even lucky if it was visceral. Most of the time we would look in an empty test tube and wonder, did we just do something? Or I'm not sure, like, how do I get an A in biology kind of thing? Like those kinds of things. Once it becomes digital, you're able to see more, map more, track more. And then when it becomes digital, it just becomes yet another pixel that we can move around. And once it becomes a pixel, we can design it. And once we can design it, we can manufacture it and and mass produce it. And therefore, it doesn't become a cute app. It becomes a weaponized virus in its worst case. So synthetic biology is just it's going from my dad's enlarger and darkroom, which I grew up with, to Photoshop, and being able to have all the power of Photoshop and After Effects and whatever we might use.
Yeah, it's there at your fingertips and a mouse click away from being manipulated.
Yes, yeah, totally. When I was thinking about this, I was thinking of a story that I'm going to steal from my friend Paul Sappho, who I think you've seen in some lectures. He's one of the original futurists, who I used to totally make fun of as a designer and a product designer. I was like, who are these futurist people? And telling the space, they don't get their hands dirty and make stuff in the here and now. But one of the many lessons that I've learned from Paul, he was telling us a story about the head of Oxford University was having dinner in the hallowed halls and the big tall dining hall, huge vaulted ceilings, and there was this fine dust that was covering their tables, and they figured it out that it was essentially termites in the beams of the big old, these are probably 200-year-old beams. And they were like, then what do you do about that? So they were having a big meeting with all of the administrators, and essentially the head of facilities of Oxford comes in and says, well, sir, your timbers are ready. And the head of the professor or the administrator of the university was like, what do you mean my timbers? He said, well, 2 predecessors ago, we planted a forest of trees, and now we have beams. Your beams are ready to be replaced. We've already grown the 100-year-old trees that and we're actually prepared for this. And I was thinking of that, like that kind of boring preparer kind of paranoid look of foundational things, I think is actually a really interesting lesson. We try to think of ourselves as quick, nimble innovators that can make things quickly in the here and now. But that kind of forethought, I think, is really powerful.
That's a great story. Thanks for sharing that. I'll remember that one. You were talking earlier about how we may not have the same relationship with retail when you're describing the trip to Best Buy. One of the things that we may not ever have again is the same relationship to healthcare. And something I was kind of like struck by is how all things are becoming remote, and yet like healthcare itself is still something that is so intimate and is so still person to person. I'm curious what thoughts or predictions you have on remote healthcare, and also how you share data between institutions and countries that might enable us to like benefit collectively from like a move towards more remote healthcare.
Right. So I've been a big advocate of telemedicine. We invested in a couple of telemedicine businesses over the last 5 years with varying success. I've been an advocate of that inside Sutter Health, and the systems are there. And I can't tell you how many board meetings that I've stood up and said, "Hey, has anybody tried the new video doctor visit?" And literally it's me and the CEO are the only person, and the CIO or the head of design. Like, we're the only 3 in the room that have actually tried it. And I keep trying to beat that drum just because I think you know, we're going to have to, for it to be sustainable, regardless of this phase, I think that we just need that to, we're short on doctors. We're either short or long on doctors. We can debate that, but it's like the healthcare costs will go down if we have more, shorter, quicker, more immediate touch points. So I've always been an advocate of some sort of telemedicine and telehealth, right? Even, you know, and health in seeing your doctor, or a wellness checkup, or that awkward, you know, doorknob question of doctors that, you know, just that one more thing. Oh, by the way, I'm having ED problems, right? Like that, those kind of questions that you don't actually, you can't get the courage to go up into the doctor's office to do, but maybe you would be able to do in a different medium. I think that those are really exciting. And I think we're going to have to redesign those in some interesting ways. So I'll give you an example. I started physical therapy for a long-term back issue that I've had. This is, I'm violating all sorts of HIPAA right now, but I started my PT in January and February, and then we had you know, ski vacation, and I came back, and there was really only a week or two where I was able to see my physical therapist before I started to get uncomfortable. And I was messaging her, should I come into the Palo Alto, you know, to the Palo Alto or San Carlos site? I'm not sure. And so eventually we, about 2 weeks later, she got telehealth going. And so PT is an interesting one, because you really think of PT, you should be laying on the table, somebody's manipulating and stretching you out, or fixing an injury, showing you posture exercises. And we've really had to work together to figure out, one, how to get connected, all the basics of like, am I on, is my microphone, you know, all of the same BS that we have with Hangouts or Zoom. But she's kind of pointing through the screen, like, no, there, your hip has to go there, you know, like how do you really start to convey some of these things that we take for granted, where somebody can just kind of, you know, no, you need to move your body like this, or no, tip your head back so I can actually see if you have a you know, strep throat or something like that. So I think that kind of remote interaction, I think, is going to be a really cool, brave new world of that, in order to make the virtual stuff work.
Well, this is an area where I am optimistic and hope that, you know, we Gen Xers will pave the way, because, you know, the boomers are too old to be early adopters, and you know, millennials and zennials are you know, just not interested in going to the doctor, or don't. So yeah, I think it's up to us.
Yes, we're ready. We're ready.
Excellent. And then when you think about like the dynamics between, you know, the patient and care providers and digital platforms, what do you think is going to be the role of AI in all of that?
Yeah, I think this is a fascinating one. I will say, on the virtual medicine part, it's still going to be a challenge to make sure that it gets monetized and figured out in terms of the payers and providers in similar fashions. I hope they don't just apply the same sort of principles. I am actually intrigued to go look at my EOB and see if my video physical therapy was at this, you know, coded in the same way as my in-persons, because I'm not really interested in paying for the entire experience of the virtual part of that experience. So I think that, you know, that's one part of the virtual, but that, you know, and in terms of AI, are you more interested in AI in overall healthcare, or as it relates to kind of the remote aspect?
I think overall it's useful.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, there's so much written and looked at in terms of AI plus diagnostics. I think that's an obvious space, and I'm more interested in I mean, those are some very powerful and foundational fundamental things, but let's just say, let's put that aside, and that there's, other than the liability part, I would say, you know, AI is going to radically shape the speed and quality of diagnostics and clinical output. It just can. We can see more cycles, you know, in the same way that you can play more reinforcement games against two AI models. You're going to, diagnostics and those sort of systems are going to get better. I really hope that those are being applied right now in order to get faster COVID quick screening, because, you know, if we don't have some sort of help, the billions of tests that we're going to have to do in the next year. I mean, I watch the daily press conferences of the task force, which drive my blood pressure up, but it's the number of tests are just, you know, insignificant, and we're going to have more AI and more people resources in order to kind of help with that. So I think that that's going to be, certainly is going to be a very powerful thing. But as we know, it takes data and it takes models. It takes time for models to get trained, and so we're going to have to be patient for a little while on this.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to be patient. We're all learning how to be very patient.
We're trying.
Yeah.
We're
when we think about business models and opportunities, what, in your opinion, is the future role of like our big tech platforms? You know, Google,
yeah.
Apple, Amazon, and healthcare.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating one. I mean, I think we're going to have to get over some privacy illusions that we already have. I remember doing my first Futurist gig in 2013 on Future of Sports, and I interviewed as many kind of tech people and sports tech people that I could get a hold of. And somehow Scott McNeely took a call from me, and I think I was talking about, I hooked him on some hockey parts of this, but he was one. I mean, it was the first time I heard him in that era say, look, there's no privacy, you just have to get over it, right? Like, he's made that kind of mantra famous by now, but it's like, he's like, come on, get over it. There is really, we don't have any privacy, and any privacy you really have is kind of an illusion. I mean, if you think about the video that was going around of the spring break, literally the mobile phones that were on the beach in South Beach, and where those were anonymously tracked back to now what are hotspots in the upper Midwest and New York and Connecticut. All of those spring breakers went home, and we could track them. And I think I kept sending that video around to my family, and they were just stunned. And I was like, really? You guys are surprised that this stuff happens? And it's, you know, I've been inside big tech and looked at the secret databases and models and stuff like that, and it's all in the application. And if we do it for good, and have principles around it, and a framework for application, it requires some forethought and ethics around that. But I think we're actually in a good place there. There will be some slip ups, but for the most part, I think that can be really, really well utilized. Now, we will see, as Apple and Google roll out this contact tracking device in both of their operating systems, I think that will be the big debate over the next 6 months. If we want to get back to work, and I don't know about you, but like, as nice as the 500 startups office is, or the X office is, I don't want to go near any of those places right now, right? Like, what's going to be the tipping point that we're all going to feel comfortable? It's likely tracking and testing and sharing of that, to the extent to which you can say, this is safe, your office is safe, this grocery store, you know, we're going to need some sort of traffic light signals to go full gas.
And then final sip here. What are you interested in as an investor?
Oh, as an investor. Oh, goodness. You know, well, before I answer the investor question, I just wanted to, I had one last thought on just kind of the readiness for, we always talk about this in venture and in innovation readiness, market readiness, technology readiness. I'm not sure that healthcare is ready for what tech can provide, right? Like they see that and it's like, oh, tech is like, it's big data or it's an interface. We can do virtual medicine. And I just don't think that they're ready for the how nimble things are. Like, so this is actually, you know, a personal thing around, you know, there's probably, I am one of probably 5 people in my circle who, and this is, there's probably 500 or 5,000 in the meme of 500 startups, like that have tried to spin up businesses in the last month in order to help. So I have 2 friends that took their manufacturing links in China and Taiwan, and oh, by the way, that factory actually makes PPE gowns and masks already. And so they wanted to, you know, so I looked into low-cost ventilators, like there's all sorts of things. And we're like, okay, ready. We can deliver 20,000 units to you. And the medical kind of distribution arms and the businesses of medical device, they're not ready to receive the speed of innovation and the speed of entrepreneurship at the moment, much less like getting something through FDA, liability insurance, all of those things that we take for granted in a very frictionless startup environment. We're ready to do those. Like that's what tech is enabling, but yet the medical system is not ready to buy. Their procurement system is, they're not ready for that, even though they need it, right? Even though they need it. So, all right, so investments. I'm, you know, the last few days have been very interesting just because I've been racking my brain and other people's brains about trying to figure out the demand signals now, and will they last for some period of time? And I think that's the magic question. If you're pinning any of that to whether COVID is a seasonal thing, or we're going to have a long tail, or there's another wave, your guess is as good as mine. But if we take this as an extreme use case, and is this a demand signal for a bunch of startups, I would say I would love to, I mean, I think that digital health is an obvious one, but I think the ones that are geared to work with and not disrupt their customers, so not try to replace some of these systems, but work within these systems in a meaningful way that makes the traction occur. I think that will be endless demand. So, you know, the next pager of which we were investors, or the next portal that is just exceptionally well designed, the next ADA, the next, you know, all of those I think are going to be really interesting. Maybe it is that wave of technology that then allows this time to retool and allows those customers in the health space, especially on the payer and provider side, to wake up to that readiness and allow them to be like actually buyers of this, rather than saying, oh yeah, we have a virtual medicine solution. You know, I've heard that so many times, and yet, you know, I was only one or two out of 15 board members in a room that had actually used the video, the video solution that was actually offered. So I think they need to be ready, and we need to meet them kind of where they are, not try to destroy them.
Those seem like key concepts for any kind of adoption, and for sure that's something you need to look at as an investor and something you need to plan for as a designer.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, we'll need to leave it there. Thank you so much, Chris. Appreciate you joining us for this segment.
My pleasure. Have a good one.